High in the Himalayas, where snow never melts and time feels ancient, whispers echo through the silence. They speak not of gods or ghosts, but of masters, silent watchers, hidden guides, beings who dwell beyond the veil of our ordinary world, waiting. But these are not fairy tales from forgotten lands. These whispers come from someone who dared to say them out loud. Helena Petrovna Blavatsky, the mother of modern esotericism, didn't just claim to believe in these secret beings. She said she knew them, that they were her teachers, that everything she taught came from them. She called them the Mahatmas, the great souls, who lived in the remote heights of Tibet and northern India. She spoke their names without fear. Master Morya, Master Koot Hoomi. She said they guided her, wrote to her, appeared to her, even from a distance. Skeptics laughed. Scholars called it fiction. Some said she was delusional. But what if she wasn't? What if, beyond the myths and controversy, there really were, or are, beings walking among us, invisible to most, but guiding a few? This is not just a story about Blavatsky. It's about a question that touches every seeker's heart. Are there truly hidden masters guiding the evolution of the soul? And if so, why do they remain in the shadows? Helena Blavatsky was no ordinary mystic. Born into Russian nobility in 1831, she could have lived a life of comfort and privilege. But from a young age, she felt pulled by something. A call, a mystery that wouldn't let her rest. By the time she was in her 20s, she had vanished from polite society and embarked on a wild, decades-long journey across the globe. From the temples of Egypt to the ashrams of India, from the ruins of ancient Greece to the hidden monasteries of Tibet, she searched for something that most people had forgotten even existed. And somewhere along that path, she said, she met them. She never described them as gods or angels. They were human, she said, but far more evolved than we can understand. They had mastered the hidden laws of nature, the deeper mechanics of mind and spirit. They were guardians of the ancient wisdom, remnants of a spiritual tradition that existed long before modern religion. She gave them names: Morya, her primary guide; Koot Hoomi, his companion. To her, these weren't mythological figures. They were real men, living in the remote fastness of the Himalayas, communicating with her. Not always in person, but through a higher form of contact, telepathy, dream, vision, and sometimes written letters that defied explanation. What she shared with the world wasn't just her own philosophy. She claimed it came directly from them. But who were these masters really? And if they existed, why would they choose her? According to Blavatsky, the Mahatmas were not mythical beings from another dimension. They were highly advanced human souls, men who had walked the earth like the rest of us, but who had spent lifetimes mastering spiritual law, cosmic principles, and the inner mechanics of consciousness. They were, in her words, adepts, individuals who had reached a level of evolution far beyond the average mind, not through magic tricks or supernatural powers, but through discipline, study, compassion, and the unfolding of inner truth. The word Mahatma means great soul, but greatness in their case didn't mean fame or wealth. It meant spiritual maturity, a deep, unwavering connection to the universal divine. Blavatsky said that the Mahatmas had transcended the illusions that bind most of us: ego, desire, fear, and ignorance. They lived simply, often in isolation, devoting their lives to guarding and transmitting the sacred wisdom of humanity, a wisdom older than any religion, older than history itself. They didn't seek worship. They didn't build temples. They guided, silently, invisibly, those who were ready to awaken. And perhaps the most astonishing thing? Blavatsky insisted they were still alive, not as spirits but as living beings, hidden deep in the Himalayas, operating far beyond the eyes of the world. So the question isn't just, who are the Mahatmas? It's also, could such beings really exist? And would we even know if we saw one? In the late 19th century, something strange began to happen. Letters, written in an unusual script in vibrant blue ink, began to appear out of nowhere. They were addressed to British intellectuals and Theosophical Society members, especially to Alfred Percy Sinnett, a journalist and editor in India. These letters claimed to come from Master Koot Hoomi and Master Morya, the same beings Blavatsky had spoken of. They weren't vague spiritual messages. They were detailed, philosophical, and often challenging. They spoke of karma, reincarnation, cosmic cycles, the hidden structure of the universe, and humanity's spiritual evolution. What shocked people most wasn't just the content. It was the manner in which they arrived. Some witnesses claimed the letters materialized in thin air, falling from the ceiling, appearing inside sealed boxes, or manifesting beneath locked desks. Others said they witnessed Blavatsky herself receive them instantaneously during conversations. Skeptics were quick to accuse her of fraud, but others couldn't explain the consistency, depth, or sheer volume of these writings. Over hundreds of pages, the Mahatmas laid out a worldview unlike anything found in organized religion, combining Eastern philosophy, esoteric science, and timeless spiritual insight. Whether miracle or manipulation, the Mahatma Letters remain one of the most mysterious literary phenomena in occult history. And they raised a haunting question in the minds of even the most hardened skeptics. What if someone, or something, was really trying to teach us from behind the veil? The Mahatma Letters weren't the only signs of something strange. Across the theosophical world, whispers began to spread, stories of people who had seen the Masters, if only for a moment. Some claimed they encountered tall, noble-looking men dressed in Tibetan or Indian robes, with eyes that seemed to pierce the soul. Others described meeting them in dreams or during states of deep meditation. A few even insisted they had spoken with Morya or Koot Hoomi in person, but only once, and only when they were spiritually ready. These experiences weren't limited to Blavatsky's inner circle. Over the decades, people from around the world reported sudden moments of unexplainable presence, a figure appearing in a crowd, a voice heard in silence, a guiding force in a time of crisis. Skeptics rolled their eyes. Hallucinations, wishful thinking, group hysteria. But those who had the encounters, they all said the same thing. It felt more real than reality. So what were they experiencing? Were these actual physical beings walking in secret among us? Or were they astral projections, appearances made through higher planes of consciousness? Blavatsky herself suggested that the Mahatmas could communicate and even manifest beyond the limits of space and time, that they had mastered the subtle layers of existence, appearing only to those who had eyes to see. Whether flesh and blood or light and symbol, the question remains, how do you measure the reality of something? That chooses when, how, and to whom it reveals itself. As Blavatsky's fame grew, so did the resistance. By the 1880s, the spiritual world was divided. Some hailed her as a pioneer, a true revealer of ancient wisdom. Others were convinced she was a master manipulator, weaving fantasy into doctrine. Then came the investigation. The Society for Psychical Research, based in London, launched a formal inquiry into Blavatsky's claims. After interviewing former associates and reviewing documents, their final report was damning. They accused her of fraud, of faking the Mahatma Letters, manipulating followers, and creating an elaborate illusion. The press had a field day. Blavatsky's name became synonymous with scandal. But something didn't add up. Many of her closest allies stood by her, claiming the accusations were politically motivated and based on hearsay, jealousy, and a misunderstanding of spiritual phenomena. Even decades later, modern researchers revisiting the case found gaps, biases, and contradictions in the original report. Some came to believe she was wrongly accused, a victim of the very dogma she fought to expose. Regardless, the damage was done. The controversy raised a timeless dilemma. What do we do with people who speak truths we don't understand, and who claim to be guided by forces we cannot see? Do we dismiss them outright? Or do we sit with the discomfort and ask harder questions? Because even if Helena Blavatsky invented the Mahatmas, what she taught through them continues to awaken minds to this day. And that kind of impact is hard to fake. But why the Himalayas? Why did Blavatsky, and so many other mystics, point to these mountains as the hiding place of the Masters? She believed that the Himalayas were not just a physical location, but a spiritual stronghold, a natural barrier that protected sacred knowledge from the eyes of the unprepared. High above the noise of cities, beyond the grasp of empires, this was a realm for those who had transcended the material world. The symbolism is powerful. Mountains have always been places of revelation. Moses received the commandments on Sinai. Shiva meditates on Mount Kailash. Tibetan yogis retreat into Himalayan caves for lifetimes. The higher you climb, the closer you come to the divine. Blavatsky often spoke of Shambhala, the mythical kingdom hidden somewhere in Central Asia, a realm of enlightened beings working silently for the good of humanity. She believed this wasn't just myth, but truth wrapped in symbol. That in the vast wilderness of the Himalayas, something ancient was still alive, not in cities, not in temples, but in silence, in snow, in stone, where those who listen just might hear something the world has forgotten. Could the Mahatmas be there still, beyond the ridges and the clouds watching in stillness, or were the mountains simply the mirror, and the real ascent always meant to happen within? Blavatsky didn't just describe the Mahatmas as isolated sages. She said they were part of something much bigger, a global brotherhood of enlightened beings working behind the scenes of history to guide the spiritual evolution of humanity. She called it the Great White Brotherhood, not in reference to race but to the color of spiritual light, symbolizing purity, wisdom, and universal compassion. According to her, this brotherhood had existed for thousands of years, and its members were not confined to one religion, culture, or continent. They included Hindu rishis, Egyptian priests, Greek philosophers, Buddhist arhats, early Christian mystics, Sufi saints, all part of a hidden chain of consciousness. They didn't wear robes of authority. They didn't seek temples or followers. They worked in silence, sending whispers into the minds of poets, prophets, rebels, and seekers. Sometimes they guided a single individual. Other times, they influenced the rise of entire civilizations. The idea might sound grandiose, even mythic, but it wasn't entirely unique. Other traditions speak of secret orders, the Rosicrucians, the Sarmung Brotherhood, the Naths, the Bodhisattvas of Mahayana Buddhism. Always hidden, always present. Blavatsky's claim was simple and radical. These masters still exist, they always have, and their work is not done. So if there truly is a brotherhood of light, how many of their messages have we missed, ignored, or laughed away? Helena Blavatsky made a bold promise before her death. The Mahatmas would continue their work, long after she was gone. And she wasn't the last to claim contact with them. Since the late 1800s, seekers, mystics, and spiritual teachers have reported strange encounters, inner visions, spontaneous downloads of knowledge, even mysterious figures appearing at turning points in life. Some say they felt a sudden presence during deep meditation. Others describe meeting a stranger who spoke a single phrase that changed everything, only to vanish moments later. Are these hallucinations, coincidences, or is something or someone still watching from beyond the edge of perception? Some theosophists believe the Mahatmas now work through different channels, guiding those who live in service to the greater good. Others think their influence is more subtle, embedded in the evolution of consciousness itself. Blavatsky said the masters would never impose, never reveal themselves through spectacle or fame. They act only when called, only when the soul is ready. Not when we beg, but when we listen. So maybe they're still here. Maybe they never left. But if that's true, one question remains. Would you even recognize one if they stood right beside you? There's something unusual about the Mahatmas, something that separates them from the many masters and gurus that followed. They didn't ask for followers. They didn't build empires. They didn't demand worship or donations. They offered only one thing, a call to inner transformation. Their letters to Sinnat and others were dense, difficult, even cold at times. They weren't trying to entertain or flatter. They were teaching law, the law of karma, of evolution, of the soul's journey across lifetimes. They spoke of discipline, of meditation, of self-mastery, of burning away illusion, layer by painful layer. They had no interest in miracles, no time for the sensational. They didn't promise bliss. They promised awakening and the hard road that comes with it. And that may be why they remain hidden, because their message isn't for the ego, it's for the soul. Blavatsky warned that few could truly understand the Mahatmas, not because they were mysterious, but because they were honest, brutally honest. They held up a mirror to humanity, and most of us didn't want to look. Maybe that's why their presence is so elusive. Maybe we keep looking for light in the sky, when the real test is, can you hold the light in yourself? But what if the Mahatmas weren't meant to be understood literally? What if Morya and Koot Hoomi, whether real men or not, also represented something deeper, a level of consciousness, an inner archetype, a version of ourselves that already knows the truth, but waits patiently to be remembered? Carl Jung, decades later, would write about the wise old man, a recurring figure in dreams and myths who appears at moments of transformation, offering insight and guidance from beyond the ego. He's not just a character, he's a symbol of our higher self. Could the Mahatmas be that symbol, given form? Joseph Campbell spoke of the supernatural aid that always comes when the hero is ready to begin the quest. Not a savior, but a signal. Not an escape, but a compass. Viewed this way, Blavatsky's Mahatmas aren't just Himalayan sages. They're reflections of the spiritual potential within all of us. The part that sees clearly, that knows deeply, that chooses truth even when it hurts. They may have had names, they may have written letters, but maybe their real purpose was not to be believed, but to be awakened within you. Because in the end, the most powerful master is not the one who appears in robes and mystery. It's the one who lives silently inside, waiting for you to finally listen. Helena Blavatsky paid a high price for speaking the names of the Mahatmas. She was ridiculed, slandered, betrayed, and driven into exile. She endured accusations of fraud, manipulation, and insanity. She lost friends, health, even her homeland. But she never took it back. She never once denied that she had been guided by real beings, that Master Morya and Koot Hoomi had mentored her, protected her, and poured into her mind a wisdom far beyond the limits of her time. Why risk so much? Why endure humiliation and loss? Just to defend a lie? She could have become a respected writer, a lecturer, a public intellectual. Instead, she chose the path of fire and walked it with unwavering conviction. Maybe that's what makes her story so haunting. Not just the mystery of the masters, but the intensity of her faith in them. She didn't ask anyone to believe blindly. She only asked the world to consider that we are not alone, that higher beings might walk beside us, and that the light we seek outside has always been within reach. Even today, her legacy divides people. Some see her as a spiritual visionary, others, a brilliant deceiver. But in either case, the question she left behind still burns. What if she wasn't lying? What if she was right, and we just weren't ready to hear it? In the end, Blavatsky's most powerful teaching may not have come through her books, or even through her letters. It may have come through something else entirely. A vibration, a transmission that passed not through paper or speech, but through presence. She often spoke of the voice of the silence, not a metaphor, but a real experience. A voice that speaks not in words, but in knowing. A presence that arrives not with proof, but with power. Those who truly studied her work said they felt it, not just intellectually, but viscerally, as if reading her words stirred something ancient in them, something that remembered. Not knowledge, but recognition. And perhaps that was the real work of the Mahatmas, not to convince, not to reveal their faces, but to plant seeds, in silence, in symbols, in souls, that would bloom decades or even lifetimes later. We live in an age obsessed with visibility. We want to see, to record, to prove. But Blavatsky pointed to a different kind of knowledge, one that doesn't beg to be seen, because it already is, invisible, indelible, undeniable, like the scent of rain before a storm, like the way you know you've been here before, even when you haven't. And maybe that's the final riddle of the Mahatmas. They were never trying to be believed. They were trying to be remembered. So here we are, more than a century after Helena Blavatsky walked this earth, still asking, were the masters real? Maybe they lived in the flesh. Maybe they walked in secret across Himalayan passes and sent letters through the astral plane. Or maybe they never needed bodies at all. Maybe they are symbols. Or truths that live deep within us, waiting to awaken when the time is right. Maybe they are voices from the soul, calling us to remember who we are and who we are becoming. But one thing is certain. Blavatsky believed, and what she taught didn't lead people into worship. It led them into questioning, into seeking, into a journey not upward to the sky, but inward to the self. She showed us that wisdom isn't something we collect, it's something we recover. That the universe isn't silent, we've just forgotten how to listen. And that maybe, just maybe, there are still watchers among us, beings who walk between the cracks of the world, guiding without glory, teaching without name. If this story opened something in you, a memory, a curiosity, or a sense that you've heard this before, drop a comment saying, I am listening to the silence between the words. And ask yourself, not with your logic, but with your intuition, if the masters were real, would you be brave enough to hear what they have to say?